Boys, today we're talking about warfare, and it's pretty damn good. Gentlemen, welcome back to Administrative Results. On this video, I want to talk about one of the better war movies that I just saw. In fact, it's actually one of the better movies I've seen in a long time. In a world of CGI good guy and CGI bad guy, this one stands on its own. And that would be A24's Warfare, written and directed by Mendoza and Alex Garland. Alex Garland's work should sound familiar. Ex-Machina, Annihilation, 28 Days Later, Dread, and that one movie we've done on the channel before, Civil War. A little bit controversial on the channel, but whatever. So we're no stranger to Mr. Garland's work. In fact, I've enjoyed a good chunk of his movies. Now, like I said, on this channel we've gone over Civil War before. What kind of American are you? Are you an administrative results American or a managerial outcomes American? And I will say again that I wasn't the biggest fan of that one because I wish it would have leaned into other stuff and, just wasn't, it was almost there. It felt almost there. There's certain things about it that just felt off. Well, he absolutely crushed it with this one, with Warfare. It was a phenomenal watch. Now, of course, since we're going over a piece of pop culture that just came out, I do want to give you some disclaimers in case you haven't had the chance to scurry to the big silver screen at your local theater and give it a watch. Spoiler warning. Gonna give away some things, gonna talk about stuff. And if you're worried about me ruining the experience for you, which I don't think I will, it's a very simple premise, but executed so well. But yet again, spoiler warning. Gotta give some context. Gotta give context. Big context guy. 9/11. September 11th, 2001. A bunch of planes hit stuff all around America. Tower 7 fell for no reason. They don't have any plane wreckage at the Pentagon. Anyway, it launches a 20-year-long war in the Middle East, in Iraq and Afghanistan, called the Global War on Terror, also known as the GWOT. If you're a man my age, you probably have many friends, family members, many acquaintances, and many of you guys that watch this channel served in the good old GWOT. Personally, I knew people that lost their lives in the GWOT, and so it hits very close to home. The movie is set in the Second Battle of Ramadi in 2006, November 19th, 2006 to be exact. Now, the Battle of Ramadi, or the Second Battle of Ramadi, should sound like it should ring some bells. There's that one famous Navy SEAL known as Jocko Willink that talks about Ramadi a lot on his podcast. Good. Your wife left you and took the kids? Good. They were holding you back anyways. Lost all your money thanks to a gambling addiction? Good. Time to rebuild. November 19th, 2006, the Second Battle of Ramadi. And that is every Jocko podcast. You're welcome. I believe the movie American Sniper takes place in Ramadi with Chris Kyle. It was known as some very intense, fierce fighting. They were dealing with that guy Zarqawi. I'm kind of giving you a speed run of it to get to the movie itself, but I'm laying some foundations. Hey Colton.
Yeah.
You ever watch Parks and Rec?
Yeah.
You know when Nick Offerman comes in wearing a red shirt and means he had sex the day before?
Oh yeah.
Anyway, your mom's doing great.
Dude, we gotta stop doing this.
Now, as we get into the movie, I want to give some context. Not a military man. Don't know all the lingo in and out. Big fan of what those boys do. My big green weenies. My boys in all the branches. Thank you for your service. Much obliged. I went out with some of my boys to go see Warfare. We got some sushi beforehand. The service, while not exceptional, was understandable because they were understaffed, so I was late to the movie. I was also drinking a lot of sake and Sapporo. Fellas, I had to take a massive #1. I had to break that seal. What I'm trying to say is I had to find a pirated version of the movie to catch me all the way up so I could see all the scenes. And boy, was I not disappointed. I love the juxtaposition of the intro to then like the next scene. The hard cut, cinematic, beautiful filmmaking. I love that. It's just like, their only music is that opening intro, and it's kind of like in the movie, and then at the very end when it closes out. The comments, dude. Most unexpected movie opening of all time. If you know, you know. Never thought I'd see this in one of the grittiest, most realistic war films ever. Warfare brought me here. Holy hell, what an gruesome experience. One of the best war films of the Iraq War I've seen. And then how it captures some humor while they're on mission, under nods, like moving to their objective. I feel like it really does capture a soldier's mentality because when they have to be serious and everything is going to hell, they're locked in. But when they have moments to be silly, they'll take those moments because it's like a break from the monotony. After the movie, I took a bunch of notes. So on the surface, I will say, as far as the grandiose natures of movies go, if you told me about this idea, I would call it kind of boring. All right, you got a Navy SEAL team in one house, in one city block, and that is the entire premise of the movie, just capturing that one incident. As far as the grandiose natures of the silver screen go, sounds boring. Now, to the movie maker's credit, to Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza, absolutely crushed it. I do want to sing this movie's praises, and I even talked to some of my buddies, and we'll get to that in a second, about what they didn't like and they did like, and these were veterans of the global war on terror. But overall, the general consensus of everyone I've talked to in my own experience was the movie's pretty solid. So essentially, the plot line is you got a Navy SEAL team in there. They're set up in a house, infiltrated overnight, set up a sniper hide, and there's a whole team there securing that area. It's not like you would see in other Hollywood movies where you just have one sniper team in there with no one else. There's a whole gaggle of dudes providing security in case things go sideways on their operation. Now, things do go sideways pretty quick because everyone in the town buttons up hatches as they prepare because the locals know, oh, it's about to kick off, and it does. Bad guys throw a frag into the sniper hide, and it kicks off the whole situation of events and the battle starts. I love all the details about it because it is so grounded in reality compared to everything else you would see in Hollywood. The frag that gets thrown into the sniper hide isn't this crazy fireball explosive, doesn't kill everyone in the building. It's just that classic concussive frag grenade. It jacks people up where they're like, oh, oh, and it's that human reaction. And the movie does this very well because one of the guys gets injured and they call for a Bradley to come pick him up. And as they're trying to get onto the Bradley, an IED goes off. And two of the guys get very badly injured and one of them absolutely gets eviscerated, and it's all horrible. There's nothing glorious about it. Even talking to some of my buddies, they were like, yeah, that was a little too realistic. Some of the things about it. One of the guys that gets injured, he is screaming because he didn't get knocked unconscious and his legs are eviscerated. He's tore up bad, losing blood as the shock probably wore off and he realizes how badly injured he is and how much pain is going through his body. And it just adds to the level of chaos because you have guys throughout the building ripping off rounds, you have comms going off on the radio chatter, you have the leadership trying to maintain the situation, and it's a beautiful thing because I believe the Navy SEAL officer in charge of everything, he got his bell rocked by that IED, and it showed the side effects of explosions, not just the shrapnel and the fireball that people in Hollywood often portray, messing people up, the slow-mo ah, when you get blown up, but it's the discombobulation of what that explosive would do to you if being in proximity to it. I was watching it and I was thinking this feels like a very gritty, realistic portrayal of reality. And this is impressive, kind of stepping back, looking at it from a movie point of view, because a lot of times with movies, they want to sell you something else. And there's kind of conspiracy theories I'm going to reach at here in a second, but if we just look at A24 alone, where they often deal with movies that are a hyper visualized, their own little stylized format that they have with their studio to be qualified to be an A24 film with certain aspects of lighting. And there was some of that creeping in, which was impressive. But I was thinking with an A24 film, how are they going to show off their unique style with a war movie like this that's taking place in the Middle East? How do they add in their flavor? And I will say it was probably a risk, but they pulled it off. Whatever happened with Civil War, whatever happened with Alex Garland and them, they absolutely pulled off something beautiful with this movie. It was very impressive. If you're not getting the sense, I would recommend you to go watch it. Now, on the conspiracy side of things, there's often this thought where, and I would say it's not a crazy reach as far as conspiracy theories go, where the Department of Defense would have their hand in Hollywood when it comes to war movies in a sense of propaganda, where it is either some kind of subliminal messaging to show hey, this war thing is good, join the war thing. Yeah, there are tough things about it, but you gotta be tough to do it, support the war effort. And it's kind of really sneaky propaganda. And I could see that creeping into war films, where it's hey, we want to get some extra funding for this. Let's hit up the DOD. Weirdly enough, when you watch Transformers in 2007, who didn't watch that being a youngling and think, dang, dude, the military looks sick. Let's fight robots. But then you join and you're like, damn, dude, this Mustang at 26% APR was not worth it. My wife divorced me already. Never should have married a stripper. Now I have crippling debt, alcoholism, and a nicotine addiction. In law enforcement, you just shack up with nurses and then they take all your stuff. Or you go to prison for something that happens on the street. Now, nerdy aspects that I enjoy about movies, the kit, period accurate stuff, firearms. Everything felt very dialed in. I was asking one of my buddies, Seth, give him a shout out, Global War on Terror veteran, and his only real complaint were some very small details. For instance, when the guys got wounded, they didn't run a 9 line, but he was saying maybe in the interest of time. He said at least there was a semblance of a missed report. Yet again, I don't, my veteran fellas, fill in the blanks in the comments. Of course, my buddy Seth's also a big cloner, so he was said that some of the weapon lights were like off, but it wasn't the fault of the armorers because some of those things just aren't available anymore. So if that's it, as far as weapon complaints go in Hollywood, they did a great job.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
Like I was looking at pictures of 2006 Ramadi Navy SEALs wearing the ACUs, kind of kit they had, matched up very well to the movie. Fellas, this one is impressive. Now the uniform, the kit, the guns, all look pretty spot on as far as that detail goes from my eye, minus like the flashlight detail, which reminds me of one of my favorite sponsors. Americana Pipeline Apparel, fantastic young Zoomers getting after the milsurp space and arena. They want to take your milsurp drip and fit to the next level, and not only do they have milsurp clothing and equipment, but they have night vision knives, manuals, and dare I say, e-bikes? They're always getting in cool stuff, so I'd encourage you to go check out their website. And as far as optics go, if you want to try and recreate something you saw in the movie, I would encourage you to take a look at Optics Planet, the optics sponsor of the channel. Big thank you to Optics Planet. To be fair, not sure if they'll have all the appropriate dots or lights, but hey, it's worth a shot, right fella? Like even thinking on the propaganda side of things, if there was any sort of influence, maybe like the secret back shady deal, even if there was, it felt like it wouldn't work with this one because it was so gritty and raw. Like there was no overt heroism. There was no, we're gonna do this because we love America. It was dudes just kind of like another day, they're running operations and things go very sideways for them. And how do they problem solve through that? That's what it felt like. These are Navy SEALs we're talking about, and everyone has this picture, thanks to popular culture, about Navy SEALs being like these indestructible, you know, like Halo Spartans, but in reality, they're people too. They're subject to things going wrong and they're subject to them dying. They're not immortals, they're not invincible. Yes, they're highly trained warfighters, but highly trained warfighters can still die. One thing I would encourage you to do is actually to go see this in theater, because the sound design was gangbusters. The gunshots, the jets flying by for show of force. It just immersed you into the movie. I really left the theater thinking, damn, that was one of the better movies I've seen in a long time. One thing I do like about the film is the radio chatter. It is not spoon-fed to the audience, like, okay, SEAL team, we gotta get the extraction point going now. You're in a lot of danger. It's very technical military jargon. It's not for you, it's for the SEALs, and you just get to listen in. I think that was a really cool detail. It was like a character all into itself. Because there are certain things where you could listen to, and maybe if you've played like a lot of video games with military jargon or you've heard some other stuff, you can kind of pick up on, you know, call signs, stuff like that, what they're talking about. You can kind of hear it, but maybe if you're never experienced that, if you're like, you know, my wife that watches it, she would just probably hear that and think, wow, that's a lot of words that I don't understand. So if you have like a rough baseline, it could be easier to pick up. And for you military guys, you probably understood every word going on. And you're probably like listening to the radio while trying to observe everything that was happening. So it makes for a really interesting like dynamic to observe. Now, something kind of unique to this movie is that there's no over glorification of warfare. There's no like beautiful glory shots of people getting mowed down. There's nothing like that where you would see that and be like, whoa, that was cool, which I think is very refreshing, because it's kind of risky, I would think, if you're a movie, because you want to have things that people will latch onto and think like, oh yeah, remember this movie? Like nothing about this shows a glorification of that combat. It's all very fast. You're processing it at what feels like the speed that they're processing it. So in the movie, SEAL team gets compromised, call for Bradley. Bradley gets IED'd, lose one guy, 2 other guys are critically injured. Leadership of that SEAL team calls for the other SEAL position to move and collapse in on them to help provide security and work on a plan to get everyone out.
Alpha 1, we're moving GDU. We'll let you know when we're inbound.
Yeah. Because everyone at the first house that got IED'd pretty much had their bell rung, and they're kind of probably not operating up to 100%. Because there are some scenes where they're trying to apply tourniquets. One of the guys is like shaking so hard he can't get it on. You may see that and think, come on, dummy, figure it out. But that dude just had his bell rung by a massive explosion. So it's like, hey, if you were him and you just experienced that, I want to see you try and pull that off.
Oh, shit.
Do you think we'll ever meet them?
You know what I mean? So it's like, I do love that it shows like how human people are and how subject to things going wrong you will be in these crazy scenarios. So the second SEAL team's moving to the house, they're fighting their way there through the streets, get there, another guy shows up that's the leader of that SEAL team, and the first SEAL team leader is like, all right dude, hey, I need you to take over. My shit is rocked. And I thought that was a really interesting detail, just kind of like that leadership recognizing like being so jacked up, like, hey dude, I need a breather. I am not well. Please take over. You wouldn't expect that of something like a normal Hollywood movie. Like in a normal Hollywood movie, that guy would be A-okay, like, let's go boys. I love how much it subverts the expectation, I will say. And then what's interesting is how it captures different personalities in these high stress situations, because as that second SEAL team shows up, one of the guys in that crew comes in and he's like super jazzed up. He's like, let's go! And he's kind of causing more harm than he is good in that moment. And that's another thing of like sidestepping the expectation where you think these Navy SEALs are like these robotic killers that are just like, I am in war, I am now engaging threats. But no, like they're subject to the realities of everyone else, where it's like people are gonna react very differently in these crazy, chaotic situations. How these guys move in the movie, like, you know they're actors, but how they move is sold very well. They don't feel like actors running like their choreography. They feel like you're actually watching soldiers that were well trained and a well-oiled fighting person go about their combat situation. Another thing is not every gunshot is a direct hit. You actually see suppressive fire. You see dudes just ripping rounds where they think there might be a bad guy, even though he has no idea. And people may see that and think, oh, is he wasting ammo? But it's like, if you look at any war footage ever, what you'll see a lot of times is dudes get in contact and they're just ripping rounds in the general direction of where they think it's coming from. There's a famous video where I think there's an army guy in Afghanistan, I want to say, where they're like, hey, there's a guy down that way, and the dude steps out with the saw and just starts ripping an entire belt down that alleyway. We don't know if he's hitting anything, but he's definitely suppressing something. So they kind of captured that very beautifully. I do love in the movie, one of the guys is John Blackthorne from Shogun. I'm John Blackthorne.
I'm English.
I loved that for whatever reason. It's my video, I can say what I want. So second SEAL team shows up, that second SEAL team leader takes charge, and he's like, hey, we need some Bradleys here for medevac. The radio message is like, hey, we can't clear those Bradleys due to IEDs unless the commander says we can. So the guy on the ground is like, tells his radio operator like, hey, you're gonna be the commander, clear it, bitch. And the guy's like, are you sure? And he's like, all right, yeah, he does it, clears it. And that was an interesting little detail. And that to me was very cool because it made you think like, all right, if you were in those shoes, risking a lot of trouble potentially impersonating like an officer like that, would you do that for your boys? You know, it's like, the officer there was like, hey, do it, dude. I don't care, we're getting our guys out of here. To me, you're putting the Bradleys at risk because they have to worry about IEDs. You're putting this radio operator at risk who now has to potentially face the answer for impersonating a commanding officer, unless that guy would be like, hey, no, I told him to do it. He was under direct order from me. I'll take the punishment. To me, a lot of us would be like, yeah, we're gonna do that. We're gonna get our guys out of here. So it's one of those really interesting, like, what would you do in this situation? I kind of like those, where you get to take something from a movie and think like, all right, if that was me, would I do the same thing? What would Jocko do? Extreme ownership. Would that leader think that that other leader made the right call in his absence? Good. I think Jocko would be cool about it. He'd be like, we gotta get our guys out of there, I think. So those Bradleys show up again, they load up the guys. So one of the guys from the first house, while helping load in his wounded buddy, kind of gets trapped in the Bradley and can't get out to go back and join the fight. And you can see it on his face, this sense of like guilt that he couldn't get back in the fight. That was another one of those details where I was like, damn dude, this is shaping up to be a very solid movie and film. Just capturing so much and showing so much without having to spoon feed the audience and be like, here buddy, here's what everyone's feeling. You can just like see it. And like there is that thing with guys that get paid to carry a gun where if they're not there in the action or taking a part of it, they're gonna feel like a sense of guilt, like they missed the show. And I think they captured that little detail beautifully. I know I'm kind of glazing the film, but it's worthy of the glaze, fellas. What's crazy about the whole thing is that it takes place in a house / a city block, and that's it. Doesn't take you anywhere else exotic, doesn't take you back and gives you closure after the firefight. It's all within one setting, within one set, and everything is executed so well. It doesn't try to be anything it's not. It's not trying to set up this grandiose battle where everyone dies and then the protagonist fights the antagonist one-on-one with a knife in some heroic battle. It's nothing like that. If anything, it's the exact opposite. It's, in some ways, it's like showing how crazy things can go sideways at a drop of a hat in reality. And that is reality. I think for them, with movies, they took a big risk because it's so counter to what you would see with big films, with epic scores, with characters going above and beyond, doing crazy heroic things. And I'm not saying these guys aren't heroic because they're thrown into like a meat grinder situation, but it feels reality-wise like they're on the back end of this fight, like they're trying to catch up and their OODA loop was messed up, so they're now trying to gain the edge again while the city's kind of collapsing on them. So when the Bradleys do show up at the end to pick up the rest of the guys, the chain guns on those Bradleys start ripping off, those Bushmasters. Pretty gnarly stuff. And one thing I was thinking about is you don't get to see like even the terrorists, you know, getting just absolutely shredded by these things. You just see them shooting into a building, kind of like a third-person perspective. You don't get to see the impacts. It really kind of does make things much more like one-sided. It doesn't fill in all the gaps of what's happening on their end. Like you don't get the U.S. soldiers' perspectives, or like an outside perspective, and then what the enemy is seeing perspective, like usually with war films you do. I think what really sucks to think about is the impact on the civilian life, that it's like those SEALs move into that house, they kind of get compromised, and then the families that were there, technically they weren't involved whatsoever, and then their house gets destroyed, at least the upstairs does, gets destroyed by those chain guns, and then, well, and the claymores, and then there's a massive bloody mess in your downstairs from some stranger's blood, and then there's human remains out in your front yard. So it's like this horrible experience on their end, and it kind of shows like this really often not talked about in the glorified version of war movies is like the civilian side of what they have to deal with. Like imagine being in your house, you're sleeping, honk shooing away, and some super soldier death trooper comes in, wakes you up and is like, this is our house now. Congratulations, you're being liberated. Like fellas, in the US, we got the Third Amendment, dude. No quartering of troops. That don't apply overseas. They ain't got no Constitution and Bill of Rights. It's war. Like when I see that, so I think about like my family and having to be subjected to that. Like after a while, insurgencies kind of start to make sense. Like I'd be kind of pissed off if my house got destroyed and full of blood and absolutely ripped apart by Bradley chain guns. Damn, dude, I'd be showing up to the US base. Hey, fix my goddamn apartment! I know you're in there! I'd be salty. Colton brought up a good point off camera, talking about Jocko, how it's like, if they jacked up someone's house, they would go back and repair it. I wasn't there. I'm hoping that happened. I know if I was that guy, I'd be like, you're gonna fix my house. Which is a whole different set of problems to think about. Like you have to provide security to go back to a house you were just fighting at, to then be like, hey, sorry, I know you were just here fighting. I want to write you a check or something to fix your house. Like, you know, that's nuts, man. What a crazy way to do warfare. I will say, if that's the case, we're pretty dang good, dude. Not only will we jack up your house, but we'll fix your house. US do war different. We are top dog for a reason. So, of course, this gets into more spoilers, but at the very end, like after all the fighting's over, all of the insurgents come out and kind of look down the street looking at each other like, dang, that was crazy. Like, was there no one watching to be like, oh, hey, here's all the bad guys. Let's drop a bomb on them. Maybe that happened and it just didn't show it, but that's what I, like if someone was watching that from thermal, it'd be like, dang, dude, they're all together right there. Boop. Anyway, warfare. I am happy I saw this. I would encourage you to go check it out, see it in theaters to get that sound design. I know some of you guys are living in your mom's basement, but that's okay. Get out of there. Maybe you'll meet your trad wife or something. I was very excited to talk about this and go over it with you boys because I know we have gone over Alex Garland's other work before, especially with Civil War. And I think that any of my complaints that I had with Civil War, the depictions of reality, leaning into themes, was rectified with this movie. Because I was worried, I was like, man, that Civil War movie was sold to me as one thing and it was portrayed as something else. And that's kind of like my biggest complaint. With this, it was sold to me as one thing and then it subverted and over-delivered on the expectations. So go into it after you see this. If you watched all the way through, if I ruined and spoiled things for you, I don't think it'll take away from the film because the plot line is so simple and very basic, but the depictions of everything is where the juice is. That's all I got for you. See you, nerds.